Yeah, everybody says you're retired now. I said, nope, I'm on vacation, and the difference between retired and vacation is about $3,000.
There you go, man. That's all right.
All right, so welcome back, everyone, to our podcast. We are almost perfect, and we try to be every week and every day. And so we are here giving it a shot again. We took a week off again because I don't remember why. I think everybody else was busy, and maybe nobody wanted to get together. I don't remember exactly, but we took a week off. But here we are.
I remember.
What happened, Tom?
Well, Wade, weren't you in Austin? I was on my way to Dallas on Monday. And
that's right.
Where were you, Brad? I mean, we were scattered to the four winds. That's why we didn't last week.
That makes sense. Very good.
Yeah. We're scattered to the four winds, so we get around.
They get around, and I was just sitting here doing nothing. So
you were fixing lunch when I finally got back.
That's right. I missed it. You're right. So I am John. I'm here with Brad. Brad, hope you're doing well, brother.
Doing well, thank you.
All right, and we are here with Wade as well. Wade, how are you?
Great, man.
All right, and of course, coming in last but not least, but recently approved for retirement, is our good friend Tom. Tom, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great, and you can see my new office. This is the home office. So if it wasn't so windy, I'd be at the real home office, which is outside. But
okay. So how's it felt, Tom?
I can tell you exactly when I felt like, I really am on the way to retirement. And it was Saturday night at the baseball game. And Asbury, many of us set our watches for 7:51 a.m. and 7:51 p.m. as our praying time. And so my watch went off at 7:51 at the ballpark. And I looked at my watch. I looked at it's third inning, I think, and I go, I don't have to leave. Usually at 7:51 when it goes off, I look up and it's second or third inning, and I head home on a Saturday night to get ready for Sunday morning. But I'm on vacation, and it was really nice. I still didn't stay for the whole game. They played way too late.
Well, good for you. Congratulations. My only regret is we didn't have annual conference in person to where we could heckle you when they called your name, but we're still glad to have voted for you. And so if you're listening, you don't know how this works. When a pastor retires, it has to be voted on at the annual conference by all the other clergy. And usually it's a tight vote, right?
Yeah.
Waiting on the speeches, and nobody gave one.
That's right. That's right. And then with all the hush money involved and everything, it didn't happen this year. But anyway, so yeah, all the other pastors vote on whether to approve a retiring pastor's request.
There were two no votes, and I was one of them because I didn't want you to retire.
Oh.
Well, and the thing is, as United Methodist pastors, we're voted on coming in, and we're voted on going out. So somehow I got the yes vote coming in. So that's the miracle.
So we're kind of like one-term president.
Yeah, but it's a really long term. Try to make it as long as possible.
Yeah, and they keep changing houses.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it's a White House. Sometimes it's a brick house.
I can't remember the name here. According to the organization, the service was exemplary, but his age is starting to catch up to him. That's not why you retired, is it, Tom? Although still in good health, he has reached the retirement age and is clearly starting to slow down. It is time. No, folks, that is not what was said about Tom. That's not why Tom retired. This is an article about an award-winning rat who retires from landmine sniffing duties. Rats don't get a lot of praise. Amen to that, rats? I mean, guys. But even the most ostracized of creatures can become a hero. Magawa, an African giant pouched rat, is one of them. Instead of roaming through sewers, Magawa has spent the last 5 years in Cambodia detecting landmines. After discovering 71 landmines and 38 pieces of unexploded ordnance, Magawa is now about to retire from the line of duty.
Boom.
Not going out with a bang, though, right? Please tell me that. Just tell me that.
Yeah. So anyway, altogether, he has safeguarded nearly 35 acres of land. That's more than 26 football fields worth of area cleared from dangerous explosives. So, like the article says, rats don't get a lot of praise, and we like to give rats praise around here. So, good job and good retirement to you, Magawa. We're happy for you. Tom, ditto.
That brings a tear to my eye. Almost.
All right. So speaking of preachers who move around, an annual conference, retiring, getting voted on, this and that, we thought it'd be a good idea to talk a little bit about itinerancy, because that is one of the marks of United Methodist churches. Whenever I've spoken to somebody who maybe is not a part of the church, United Methodist Church, but some other denomination, when you mention Methodist, it sometimes comes down to, oh, your preachers move a lot, don't they? I'm like, yeah, we do. And we call that itinerant ministry. And I thought it'd be a good idea to talk a little bit about what that is, why we do it, when did we start doing it, should we keep doing it, what's good, what's bad, blah, 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 wah, 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 wah. So how many appointments did you serve, Tom?
Oh, goodness. It's funny. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8.
8 appointments. So,
and that doesn't include itinerating overseas. So,
okay. So Tom was appointed 8 times plus a.
Well, one of them was a 3-point charge. So I'm counting that.
All right. Wade, how many appointments you got?
4.
How about you, Brad?
I'm counting. Hang on here.
You need a scroll or?
Need a slide rule. I'm old.
Where's your abacus, man?
Let's say 2, 5,
8 appointments. Wow.
34 years.
Okay, very good. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 appointments, and then church work before that as part of the process. But anyway, so we move, and that's part of how we do things. That's part of what we sign up for. It's not like it's a surprise. The only surprise is whether this is your year or not, right? So that's kind of one of the distinguishing marks of how Methodists do ministry. We move our preachers around. Guys, when did we start doing that, and why do you think we started that way?
Well, we were a frontier mission, so I know basically from the very beginning, we at least in the United States, I was thinking, what's his Asbury? He had a circuit which was, multiple states where he covered. So it was just kind of what we grew up as a frontier church and kept advancing because we kept moving, I guess, west mostly. And I know one of the things that, and as someone who has served both in the North and the South, or started in the South, went up north, came back to Texas, so here Southern Baptist is pretty strong. Up north, it's Lutherans, not Baptists. But in Texas and in Wisconsin, you'll find a lot of Catholics and a lot of Methodists. And we are very evenly distributed across the nation. We're not Southern, we're not Northern, we're national.
Okay.
I know that, we talk about an itinerant system as something that we do, every year. Clergy are up for for reappointment or appointment elsewhere, depending upon the needs of the greater church. But originally, it was a 3-month term. You served a circuit for 3 months and then moved on. And somehow believed that aggregate of numbers of pastors that would serve a particular parish or charge or circuit, the more pastors you have, the more well-rounded the message is going to be. Development of Christianity. That was the original. I'm very grateful that we are not moving.
Yeah, the bishop used to appoint or fix the appointments 4 times a year, right? Back then. Yeah. Okay. Quarterly conferences. That's right. Instead of the year. That's right. Wade, what do you know about itinerant ministry?
Well, I was an itinerant Army brat before I was a pastor. And so
came into it honestly.
I don't feel like we moved like that often. Because we had some 1 and 2 year hitches when I was a kid. So, you know, when I came in, I knew that Methodist pastors were itinerant, or that they moved a lot. And it didn't really faze me because I'm sort of used to moving all the time anyway. So, you know, when I would get questions about, are you willing to, you know, go where you're sent? I'm like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you be? I will say that, you know, it's inconvenient, like it's personally inconvenient, right? I don't know about you guys, but it's expensive, because I mean, they cover much of the Methodist Church covers much of our moving costs, but anytime you move, there's, you know, there's just expenses. And so, from that side, I prefer to move less often. But you know, I think it's, for me, it's always bittersweet. I mean, you're leaving people that you care about, but you're coming to a new challenge. And that, I don't know about you guys, but that always kind of gets me going again, in a new appointment. That doesn't mean I wasn't going in the last appointment, but it's just always like a new puzzle to put together.
Sure. Yeah, something new to look forward to, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Tom, you spoke about the frontier aspect, and that's what I was thinking about. How, you know, one of the things that's kind of changed over the years is, you know, before they were itinerant preachers, and today we're more itinerant pastors, right? They had a more prophetic role as they were going into the wild frontier and encouraging and getting churches in line. Church I served in the hill country, they did one of those brick walkways where you could buy a brick and, you know, have your name or whatever. And they did a section for all the pastors, and the church had been around since the 1800s. And I remember once I was looking at the bricks, I noticed a lot of these preachers lasted like 1 year or something. So I asked somebody, I said, hey, why do you think they were only here a year and this and that? I said, well, back then people used to walk around with shotguns, and some of these preachers, we didn't like what they had to say. So we would tell them and they would move along. And, you know, there's probably half truth to that, of course. But anyway, there was a more prophetic sense to what the pastors brought to ministry and to the church back then.
Because you weren't there every Sunday necessarily.
Right. And, you know, kind of like when you bring in a guest preacher today, you know, that person can say something that maybe you would have to deal with if you said it, but they say, you're like, well, I didn't say it, but let's talk about it, right? So, and of course, now we're having more pastoral role in what we do. So we love that, though. If these Methodist preachers were giving, by and large, a prophetic role, then that means the people of the church had the pastoral role, right? I love that. And, you know, of course, I think we've missed some of that in modern sense of church, but
the traveling preacher also had the responsibility. It's kind of where we got the concept of being a traveling elder. Is that we were
hearing him
ordering the church.
So try this, Brad. When you start talking, it sounds good, and then it goes down. So maybe take a breath after half a sentence.
Okay.
It's really weird.
I don't know what's going on. Anyway, no, I was just saying that there's a sense in which preachers then preached an awful lot But they also were responsible for sacramentals,
Right.
sacraments. And that's something that the church itself could not do. So it may be if they had a circuit that they were riding 3, 4, 5 churches across 2 or 3 different counties, only once a month or once every other month, would you get communion, or once a quarter would you have baptisms and those kinds of things. But the church did take care of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you guys have moved around, Wade, you talking about the personal inconvenience of it. Why do we still do that? What benefit does it have for the church today? Not so much for us, but of the church and the ministry. What benefit do you guys see from it, or have you experienced from it in our modern sense of ministry?
I didn't preach about this week, but I did preach from Romans 12 this week for a sermon series we're doing. And in Romans 12 it talks about the body has many parts, and they're all useful. And I think that's true for pastors as well. There are things that I do well, and there are things that you guys do well, and they're not necessarily the same thing. And so there's a season for everything, right? And so I think sometimes you need different gifts for different seasons. I don't know how much that figures into specifically figures into how the bishop and the cabinet decide who's moving and when and where. But I do know that every pastor that I've followed had some really useful gifts that maybe I didn't have, but I was able to bring some things that I had, and then the people that came after me brought some different gifts. And so I think that's one thing I think is beneficial about itinerancy for the church. And then the other thing is, if you have a pastor who's at a church for a long time, sometimes it becomes about the church's sort of identity becomes about the pastor who's there.
Yeah.
And we are, in all of our polity, we're 50% lay people, 50% clergy, and I think there's the possibility that that can get watered down if everybody's everywhere for a long time. And I think if we did that too, I have no idea what that would look like for Methodists, but I think the connectional the connectional sort of value that we have about sharing ministry across a lot of different platforms would probably be diluted.
What do you think is a long time these days?
Well, we've got some folks in recent years who've been places for 20 plus years, but that's really the exception, not the rule. I don't know what a long time is. For some churches, me being there a year is probably a long time.
For everybody involved, yeah.
And then sometimes I've got a friend who moved this year who was at their appointment for 8 years, and I think it seemed like to them, and it seemed like to me, a very short time. So I think a lot of it has to do with what's going on in the community and the church that you're in.
Yeah. But one of the things I remember kind of stuck with me is for us at one time, people were pretty much where they lived where they were born. They grew up there, and there wasn't a lot of mobility from place to place, and so the change was the pastor. And now it's basically, if you stay in one place for 5 years, there's going to be a whole new face to the church. And I remember a few years ago just basically talking about the different pastors. I don't remember what the message was, but I do remember how I was basically asking how many of you know who remember and went through the pastors, because we certainly haven't had a long history. We're about 40 years old at Asbury. But anyway, and then coming to that, to that realization that for a large number, I'm not going to say huge numbers, but I'd say maybe 20%, maybe fewer than that, who have known no other pastor at Asbury other than me. And that was, that kind of shocked me, is how many of you, I'm the only pastor you've known here. And the hands went up. It's like, oh, wow, things really do change.
That's a good point. Brad, found fruitful about itinerancy.
I didn't understand what you said. There's an echo.
What have you found fruitful about itinerancy?
Oh, fruitful. I thought you said frou-frou, and I'm going,
That's my next question. We talk frou-frou
No.
later.
I think the itinerancy is just that. It's that gift of broadening the message that comes to the local church, and for the benefit of the whole church, to be able to hear. I think Wade, you said it earlier, that we each have different gifts and graces that we bring to the congregations that we serve, and to be tied in with one pastor for an excessively long time kind of narrows that possibility of getting a broader view of the gospel and teaching of the church. At the same time, moving a pastor every 3 months or every year or every 2 years does not give the congregation enough time to actually get to know the pastor of the congregation. So there has to be a balance somewhere in that. And I know that somewhere along the line, a few years ago, I think that the average length of appointment for a pastor in Methodism was somewhere in the area of 3.5 years, or somewhere in that vicinity. I do know one bishop that was trying to extend every appointment to at least 10 years. And the reason behind that is that it takes 5 years for a congregation to really, for a pastor in a congregation to really get to know the congregation and build up that trust in such a way that they can actually have a reasonably, unified vision, or some semblance of an agreed upon vision and mission for the church. So, 10 years is not long at all. And then, 2 years can be an eternity if you're in the wrong place, for a pastor or the church. So,
yeah. I've got a question, because we talk about what a pastor brings to the congregation, and that cross semination, or cross cultural broadening of the church's perspective. But I'm curious as to, we've all served multiple points, and what has that brought to you? What have you learned? And I my guess is I've got the broadest, widest view, because of just the fact that I've been around the world in doing ministry. And my first appointment was, I had a rancher who was ranching 40,000 acres, 20,000 of which he owned and 20,000 which he had leased. And it's like, and then the next place I served, it was dairy farm country, where it was 30 cows and 80 acres. And it's an entirely different mindset. So I'm just curious, from y'all's perspective, what have you experienced by itinerating? Sorry, John, I kind of took over your.
No, I love that, because that's part of what we talk about, right? It isn't just what the churches learn from the pastors, it's what the churches teach pastors as well, because then we carry that to our next appointment, and so on and so forth. So there's a reciprocal relationship and a walk that we have. If I think about the different appointments I've had, they've come at obviously different seasons of my life and ministry. And in a lot of ways, that those churches have corresponded to where I was in a way that was very helpful for me. Whether it was being in school, or whether it was raising younger children, seeing the way that churches were willing to adapt and sort of broaden their horizon, so to speak, was helpful to me to realize what could be possible if you can help people see. Brad used the word vision. Help people see the vision that God has for the church, right? And so, I've had churches where we've had sort of seemingly almost unlimited resources. I've had churches where we've had, week to week resources, and to watch the different kinds of ministry that come out of those, regardless of what you have, and how you have to figure out, what your calling is for your particular congregation, has been meaningful and helpful for me as well. And then I've also learned a lot, and I don't know how much I should say, but um, after I leave a congregation, and hearing how churches sort of continue in ministry, that's also been helpful for me, to realize what kind of impact I should have had, versus maybe the kind that I did, and did I do too much that I, letting the church do, those kinds of questions. And so looking at a church after I've been gone has been helpful as well, to help me form some of my sense of what I think I need to do uh, while I'm with a congregation.
I'm like you, Tom, that I've experienced all different kinds of appointments. The church, we call them appointments because we're appointed to them. But my very first appointment was in a 1,600 member church in a very small town, which was really ironic. It was the largest church in the town, but I was an associate pastor there. And I learned how to do weddings and funerals in that church. I had a wedding just about every weekend, and sometimes two or three weddings a weekend. And I was officiating at funerals, not necessarily for church members, but for folks in the community that didn't have a church relationship. So I learned an awful lot there in that church. My second appointment was a rural church where there were 112 people. And most of the men folk in the church would leave for almost 2 months or so during the springtime when calving season came in. And I had nothing but a church full of ladies and little girls. And that was really odd for me. You look out in the congregation, where are all the guys at? Well, they're in the field, with the cows are being born. So, oh, okay. I'm used to a railroad town, and this was just really bizarre. And then I served other churches like you, John. I served churches that had no limitless funds. I mean, they had totally unlimited funds. And then I had other churches that, day by day, week by week, if they could, and sometimes they had to borrow. It's all across the spectrum. The one thing that I did learn is that in every one of those churches, there were people who truly wanted to know how to love God and love each other. And that some of them, it was really difficult for them to want to love each other. But, you figure out ways that you can encourage that and love on that and love on them. And I learned I learned more from the folks in the churches where I've served than I ever did in seminary. And
yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I've noticed when I leave a church, and this is kind of probably either healthy or unhealthy and unique to my personality, but almost immediately after I leave, I tend to get into this mindset of and I don't linger there, but was that a positive experience or was it a negative experience? Mm-hmm. And I've had a couple of places that I left that I probably thought initially were negative experiences, mm-hmm. maybe more so than positive. But what I find is that usually that's about my perception and not about what actually happened. And when I think about the people who I have met and worked with in ministry, who are just dear people that I love, there's not a church that those people aren't still there. And whether I thought going out it was a negative or a positive experience, I look back on all of those now because I've been here now for 3 years, and so I'm kind of outside of even my last appointment, and I look back on that stuff and I feel like we built each other.
There you go.
They built some things in me, and I built some things in them, and I see fruit from both things years afterwards. My first charge was a student charge in a little tiny town called Lone Oak. And it was challenging in some very unique ways. I'd never lived in a rural place before in my life. So that was, eye-opening. But those people, all of those people, I'm still in contact with them peripherally. And they are they put, I was 2 weeks out I was a week out of licensing school, where John and I went to licensing school together. And I was in charge of this church, and I didn't know what I was doing.
Wait,
And,
they passed you?
huh?
They passed you?
Oh, sorry, John. Did you have to go back?
I had to go back, man.
Remedial licensing.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing I would say is licensing school, John, when I left that licensing school, I considered that a negative experience. And I can't tell you how much that was helpful in that first year, the things that I was able to remember from licensing school that got me through that. And so, I think we've all had experiences that are tough at times everywhere we've been. But I would take those tough experiences for the relationships that I have with some of those people now.
Sure. Amen.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of something that I heard. I was just talking about dealing with, the person was talking about dealing with grief, and the phrase he used is, every pastor has a suitcase full of failure. And that, you look back, and like you say, Wade, it's in retrospect, you begin to see some of those moments, because a lot of times that moment when you're being reappointed or, appointed elsewhere, it's usually because something has happened to kind of a catalyst that says, they don't want you there and you don't want to be there. And it may have been good for 4.5 years, but that last half year, not so great. But and so you may leave a place at a point where it's the lowest moment in the entire experience, but then you come back. And I know this is true for me, at least in one particular place where I remember exactly when we left. It was Sunday afternoon, August 14th. I'm not going to give the date, but everything was loaded in our small car, and we pulled out of there. And yet, when I look back at the overall experience, I go, man, that was one of the most enjoyable experiences, because of the people and because of the opportunities and the things I did, because it was a small community. And there's the Lutheran pastor, there's the Catholic priest, and then there's the community pastor, and whoever the United Methodist pastor is there is going to be the community pastor. And so I look back at those days, and I have a different perspective now than I did on August 14th. It was, and the other thing is, it's after the fact sometimes that you then get the message from somebody who says, you made a difference in my life, and it surprises you. And in my case, there was a letter that came from someone who was very antagonistic, and yet saying, I came to Christ, and I said, now I understand what you were talking about, and I appreciate what you did during the time you were here. And you go, thank you. I will never forget that kind of letter.
Sure.
And I kind of had a little, not an opposite experience, but one of the appointments that I left came out of left field. I didn't think I was leaving. The congregation wanted me to stay. I felt like we were just getting rolling. And I was like, the DS called me and said, hey, I got your next appointment. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, we're not done here. And I remember he said, if you didn't say that, I'd be disappointed. But then I went to the next place, and I watched that church grow in some ways that I don't know if I could have done that for them. And so, and I was the right person at the right time for the new place. And so, I think saying yes to itinerancy is more than saying you're willing to move periodically. I think it's trusting the people that are in leadership in that cabinet room and the bishop, and trusting that God's going to see a way. I mean, I think there's a real exercise in faith to say yes to itinerancy. And there are lots of reasons when it comes time to move to just rage against itinerancy, right? But I think that my experience with that, even though in the moment I may have termed it negative or positive, I think overall it's been just a really good lesson in faith.
I would say, and I'm on the, I'm what's today, 21st, so I'm about 10 days from official retirement.
Not that you're counting.
Yeah.
I really wasn't. I'm going, okay, but what I'm about to say is it's not going to affect my next appointment.
Right.
But I would say I trust the process more today than I ever did. As in my first appointment, my second appointment, there's I just know. First of all, I see the wisdom of the cabinet, that they have a broader view, that they and they're wrestling with some pretty challenging issues overall, things that we deal with some pretty big issues on the church level or the community level, but they're looking at an even bigger map. And like I said, I have learned to trust the process more in my later years than I did in my early years. Now, anytime I was asked to leave and I wasn't expecting it, it was still it's kind of like you say, Wade, it's a hold it, wait a minute, I'm not done here. And those, but that had more to do with my comfort level than the actual call that God had on my life. So
I'd be interested to have some lay folks in on this conversation, kind of see how they, receive pastors or what they've, experienced, and kind of how it's impacted their faith and what they've seen in church. I echo what Wade said. One of the notes I have here that I wrote for myself is that I feel like this itinerancy sense of ministry helps all of us as pastors and as a church to depend on God, right?
oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We have to depend that God is going to send us to the place we need to be, that God is going to send the church who needs to be there, that God is moving in some way that, what Brad or Wade or Tom or anybody else brings to ministry is going to be helpful for a particular congregation in that season. So it's a big trust, a big, lesson in trusting and depending on God, right? And as much as there is to say about why do we do this, culture is different today than it was in the early frontier days and all that kind of stuff. But there is something meaningful that we can see. I met a guy recently who's a pastor of a non-denominational church, and we started talking, and he asked me about, you Methodist pastors move, and so on and so forth, and blah blah blah. So told him how it is and how it works or whatever. And he said, "Wow, you guys are really married to the church, right?" And there's a sense that, yeah. So just like in my married life, when she says do this, I do it. So when the church tells me to go, I go too. I'm a highly trained spouse, and I do what I'm told. So anyway, all right, Brad. Any final thoughts as we close out?
Everything that we do, as far as itinerancy is concerned, is for the greater church, for the good of the greater church, for the kingdom of God. So it's one of those things that we're asked about for a reason. Can you see the bigger picture? The bigger picture is that we have an offering of servanthood to God's church, and God is in that all the way around. I agree with Wade, Tom, and you. We trust the system because the system is really spirit driven, and I'm all that they do in the bishop and the cabinet, I wouldn't want their job. I really wouldn't want their job. But I still love the churches and all the folks that I've ever served. It's a privilege. And not too many more years, I'm going to join Tom. So, yeah.
That's good. Final words, Wade.
I think I've talked enough.
That's what your last church said. Yes, that's Tom.
You ain't gone yet.
Tom, what you got for us?
Well, and looking back and having the opportunity to hear from people I've known throughout my ministerial life, it's been a glorious, delightful, wonderful ride that God has been in all the way, and just it's a blessing to have been and I still am a United Methodist pastor who has been able to serve, with very few exceptions, more than 3.5 years.
And you know what the big beauty of that is you're still gonna be here in Corpus Christi, right?
Right.
And we always need stand-ins, so we'll
So the answer to any request is no right now.
Give them about 6 weeks.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, you can start asking in September, October when I have a better idea. But the summer, no, it belongs to
baseball.
my wife and the Hooks.
Very good, very good. So itinerancy has a value to the life of the church today. That's why we keep doing it. Hopeful that our ministry, as we go from place to place, is fruitful ministry, and the relationships that we form in our churches and the ways that we engage with one another, all add to the kingdom of God and all for the glory of God. And so hopefully, as pastors, we remember that, yes, our churches have something to teach us, and that our churches as well recognize that there's something that we bring to the life of the church as well that is important. So great conversation. I appreciate it, guys. We got a lot of people moving in the next few weeks. Some of them are moving for the first time. Some of them are going to first appointments. Somebody in a church has been, like Tom mentioned before, has been in a church, has never had a new pastor, and that's going to be a new experience for them. So all of that around this time always leads us to offer up prayers for churches and colleagues as they make moves, and families and all that kind of stuff that gets involved when you have to do a move. So our prayers go with all of you. Thank you for listening and for being a part of it. If you have anything you want to add to it, let us know. And if you got a question about anything that we can help find a Christ-like response to, let us know. We want to talk about it. Send us a Facebook message, or we have an email, I think, and then there's a phone number you can call. And all complaints go to Tom because he's retired and he doesn't care anymore. So, all right, Wade, Brad, Tom, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I appreciate you, fellas. Have a great rest of the week, and God be with you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.